or maybe it just took a little bit to catch up with itself. But we are back live with a couple things that I wanted to talk about, and we're going to get straight into it. So, finding your name in prophecy. Um, so, this was a thing that I would not have imagined existed early on in my like childhood and in my young adult years. I would not think that I'd be able to pick up the Bible and find my name in the text, right? Because I, like most people, believe that the Bible was, you know, good for history, good for storytelling, but was really an, an adaptation of myths and legends that some of them were historical and then some of them were, based on mythology. And this is not what I publicly said, right? But this is what I believed really on the inside, because of course you war in your mind with two different worlds, and we've talked about this before on this channel. When you're educated in the secular world, you begin to look at the secular world as the real world, and the way that you're taught the secular world exists is, radically different from the way that the Bible displays and portrays the real world. So, like most people, I believed in the Bible. I guess you could say culture. I was a cultural Christian, but in my heart, I believed in evolution. I believed in the Big Bang. I believed in, all the stuff that they teach you about history. Those were the things that I believed in. And then everything else was categorized as mythology or something close to it. So I would have never imagined that I would ever find my name in the text anywhere. Yes? Okay. All right. My boys are doing a test right now, and they're going to be asking for some help, so I'll be in and out. But I do want to make sure that I get this off real quick so that I can feel good. What's up? Karab. Just because you put a wall right here, it doesn't necessarily change the whole meaning. You need to move your desk this way too, so you guys can't see each other. Move it this way. Oh, and look at this. Some of these are on the test. Move your desk all the way so that you don't have to see him. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that I get this concept out so it's not, so I don't forget it. And I've talked about it before, but I just really want to highlight certain things and make really a whole post about it. What's up? Now you shouldn't need no whole bunch of help, Jackson. You said that you was ready.
Is it like wall? This one right
Our people. You know that. We say it every day. You know our goes at the end of the word. It's a pronoun, so it goes at the end of the word. At the end of the word, like this. What is it? Shema Yisrael Ya'o Eloheinu Ya'o Achad. We say it every day. All right, so what we want to do is go ahead and talk about it for a second. Okay, so finding your name in the text. It's something that I didn't think that would ever happen, but it ended up happening, right? And I didn't find my name specifically. It didn't say my name there, and I was like, oh, there I am. Because as we know, our family names have been wiped out. Normally, in times past, we would be able to find our names in the text. We would be able to find our families. We would know where we came from. We'd know if we were Benjamites that we had this history of rebellion, and the guy that sent the prophet that came, and then they raped his concubine, and he sent her pieces to the rest of the tribes. We have that history, right? We were the people that caused that event to happen. So we were Benjamin, we'd know that we have that in our history. If we were Judah, we'd know that we had all the stuff from Judah in our history, the good kings, the bad kings. Judah and Tamar is in our history. All these things, these characteristics, the personality traits that would be specific to our line would be in our history, and we would know, okay, so this is where this comes from, this is where that comes from. If we were Reuben, same thing. If we were any of the tribes, we'd have even the prophecies associated with us, like it is in, what is it, Genesis 40, 49. So we don't have that, right? We don't have that history. And so we don't have it. We're not used to looking for it, if that makes sense to you. We're not used to looking for our history in a book. We just intrinsically know that it's not going to be there. So we, relate our history via our own immediate family and the things we see on TV, basically, the things we read in the books about us. But the concept of finding your name in text doesn't always only begin with just your name. Of course, we found the things that have happened to us in the text. We know that Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 really outline the things that have happened to us in our known history, because our history only goes back 400 years. But even in that 400-year time span, uh, Deuteronomy and Leviticus and the curses there are expressing themselves in manifold ways. So this is how we find our name in the text for Israel, and literally find what our name is in the text. So being able to identify people in the text is something that we need to know how to do. And we need to know how to do it correctly, because if we misidentify, like we talked about the last time or a couple times ago, if we misidentify in the text, then we are not dividing scripture in the right way. We are missing the mark. So it's funny because we are not the only ones with prophecies in the text. And this is what I really wanted to get to. I apologize, you guys. It's taking me 8 minutes to get to the point that I want to make. We're not the only names in the text. Even though the text is about us and, Elohim's encounters with our people, there are other names in the text that ring of prophetic significance, right? And so, of course, like we've been talking about here on this channel, Gog and Magog are mentioned in the text, right? And we've talked about the difference between Esau and Gog and Magog. We've talked about that in modern Hebrew doctrine, that lots of Israelite camps have identified Esau as a man, and we've talked about how that's not the case extensively on this channel. And we've also talked about the actual identification of the white man with Magog, with the person Magog and the clans around Magog, all molding together to take on that one Magog name, right? And that's what we have seen historically to have happened. And we've also seen, the people that are now named and identified in history trying to hide that identification before we even know. Do you see what I'm saying? Before we even know who they are, they've already set traps, which one of them is the Edomite doctrine, the Esau doctrine, for us to not know who they are, and for them to try to hide their actual identity. So one thing that I wanted to focus on on this particular topic is what did or what could they have thought when they first saw their name in the text, right? Because let's just play out this scenario, and then I'm going to show you some times in history where we can see that that's happened, right? And it's with the groups of people that we're talking about, with the Magog clans. So, what would that have looked like? If you can imagine a scenario, if you can step back outside of um, your normal waking reality and imagine a scenario where you are given a book and you're told to read the book because part of it is about you, except things that haven't happened yet, right? So, so you get this book and you read this book and you find your family name in the book, right? Let's just say your name is, okay, let's just use a famous example. Let's just say your name is, um, I want to use a famous example here. Let's just say I want to use somebody that, okay, let's just say you're uh, Tom Cruise, right? Let's just say you're Tom Cruise and you pick up this book and they say, okay, well, it's about you. And you pick up the book and you read the book and you find the name Cruise in, but you find it in some older form with a person who you know that you had been related to. Let's just say Tom Cruise has a ancestor named John Cruise, and you see the name John Cruise in the book, right? And this is a book that you were given or stumble across, and you have no, knowledge of the writers of the book. You have no history of association with the writers of the book. But these writers of this book know who you are and know who your family is. And not only that, know what you're going to do in the future, right? It says that John Cruise and his descendants will go on to lead famous careers in entertainment and become wealthy, right? And then you look up and you're Tom Cruise and you see the name of your ancient ancestor in this book. And then you also see that the book says that the sons of this man will go on to become rich and famous. What do you then do with that information, right? As Tom Cruise, and knowing that you're this famous superstar, right? Finding a book that is provably older than, do you see what I'm saying? This is not some book that somebody made after you became famous. This is a book that's provably older than you are, provably older than your father is, provably older than your grandfather is, speaking about your grandfather and what would happen to his children in the distant future, right? And so, as Tom Cruise, we're speaking, the scenario is involving Tom Cruise. As Tom Cruise, what do you do with that information? What do you do with it? What do you do with the concepts surrounding it? Right? How do you then react? Does that cause you to become now pious? Because now you see, okay, well, I guess this is outside of a religious context, but do you now adhere to the writers of this book? Like, let's just say there's some people from the family that wrote this book are still around. Do you go and seek those people out? Like, hey, how did your great great grandfather know about my grandfather? They weren't even in the same time period. How did they know about my family, and why do I not know these things, right? How do you guys know who I am before I was born, right? Wouldn't that be what you would do? You would seek those people out and you would ask them questions about yourself, right? So let me give you some moments in time where this very thing has happened in the text. Literally, this thing happened, right? Provably happened. I'm going to give you 4 times. I'm going to give you, I've talked about 2 of them on this. I've talked about all of them on the channel before, but I'm trying to like put it together to show you guys the significance of what we're talking about here, the significance of this Gog and Magog prophecy. And I suppose it's happened more than 4 times. It's happened a bunch, right? And so start off with, and I want to start off with Cyrus, but I suppose we could start off with Nebuchadnezzar too, because he has this dream. But let's just talk about the text. So I guess we wouldn't be able to include Nebuchadnezzar. I'm thinking Nebuchadnezzar, but we wouldn't be able to include Nebuchadnezzar because he doesn't find himself in the text. He has his dream. Yes? What's up? What about it?
Is this a name right here?
This? What is this? What is this word?
Oh,
What's this word?
a hermit. Oh.
Okay, so what does it mean though? Nope, not this time. What else can it mean?
2.
There you go. And then what does the at the end mean? Think about it. It's 2 words right there, not one. Good job. All right. All right, so we can't include Nebuchadnezzar, but let's start with Cyrus, right? So we know in the book of Isaiah, Cyrus is called a Messiah, right? Cyrus is literally prophesied during the time of Isaiah to be a Messiah to the children of Israel. And this is what happens. We know that Cyrus comes and conquers Babylon and frees the Israelites from Babylonian, or the Judites, Babylonian captivity. So, does he then see his name in the text and then cause this thing to happen? We have to kind of speculate that this happened because in the future it happens again, right? It happens again where, because literally Cyrus's name is mentioned in the text before there is a Cyrus. And for him to miss that, being a conqueror of Judah, doesn't do Judah justice, doesn't do Elohim justice. We don't necessarily have it written in the text that he sees himself in the text, but we have his name mentioned beforehand. And then we have him doing all of these incredible things on Judah's behalf. So we know that there was a very strong push for him to release, to free, and then even the kings after him, not even just Persian kings, but Medians as well, doing the same thing and showing favor on the children of Israel for some inexplicable reason, right? Because as we know, the Samaritans at the time were antagonistic and trying to bring the Persians and the Medes against Israel to varying success. But we know that Cyrus's name is mentioned in the text before he gets to the text, right? Before he gets there. And so another instance when this exact thing has happened is with Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great, we know, conquered the entire world during the time during the time right after the Persians. So Alexander the Great goes on to conquer the Persians. We know that this was also prophesied in the book of Daniel. What we didn't know is what Josephus tells us, that when Alexander the Great was conquering Syria and traveling south to conquer Egypt, he has to travel through Israel. And this is again pieces of historical fact that lets you know that Jerusalem is where Jerusalem is. But we can talk about that in another video. But he has to cross down through Israel to get to Egypt before he goes on and continues the rest of his campaign of taking over the world, basically. So what he does is when he gets into Israel, he doesn't have any pushback, right? And from what Josephus recounts is that the priests knew he was coming. And so he was allowed to walk in because the scripture says in Daniel that there will come this notable horn from the west pushing east. And so they hear, I mean, they're not in a vacuum. They hear of Alexander the Great. They know where he comes from, Macedonia in the west. They know that he's pushing east to conquer the rest of the world. Remember, the known world at that point in time was all to the east, not further west of where Greece was. It was south and east. And so we see him pushing east. So he walks into Jerusalem unabated, right? No resistance whatsoever. And he goes up to the priest, and the priests are like, "We knew you were on the way." And Alexander looks at the priest and he says, "I know you too, because I recognize the letters that are on the top of your head. Of course, you know the name of the Father is on the plate that sits on top of the mitre, on top of the priest's head, right?" And so he sees that nameplate and he says, "I've had a dream about these letters." And Josephus then goes on to say that the priest explained to him who it is that the name is talking about. Of course, Josephus doesn't repeat the name because at that time we know that that information is, classified, right? And and we always talk about whether that's the right thing to do or not. It definitely is not the thing to do when you are in a religious aspect. You don't hide anything from people. But as far as with the Gentile, the Gentiles, and just releasing the name of the Father to, you know, pagans and heathen, yeah, I do think that we should be cautious um, in who has the name of our Father in order to blaspheme with it, right? We know that the nations blaspheme the name of Elohim through us, right? This is in Romans 2, I believe. But with all that being said, Alexander has had a dream about the name of Yahweh, and he sees the name on the nameplate and says, "I recognize that name, that word." And the priests then lay out his prophecy, right? They show him in Daniel where he is and what he's destined to do. And Alexander the Great goes on to do exactly that thing, continuing to push east and conquering the entire world. And then even the prophecy after that comes to pass because he must know that he's not going to have any children, right? The scripture says that he wouldn't have any children, and he dies childless. And when he dies, his kingdom, which is the entire world, was split between four of his generals. And they are to the north, the south, the east, and the west, exactly like it says in the text. This text, according to Josephus, was shown to Alexander, and Alexander believed it. Do you understand? Alexander saw his destiny in a book with a people that he had never heard of or had any interactions with, and a corner of the world where he was just passing through to get to Egypt. Jerusalem wasn't on his list of just conquering places. They weren't the major prize to be conquered. Persia was, Egypt was, Assyria was. Do you see all these great ancient nations that have, Babylon was? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I mean? Alexander the Great went on and crowned himself king of Pharaoh in Egypt, right? So this is what his goal is to conquer the world, and Jerusalem isn't on the list, right? As he passes through to get somewhere else, he runs into a people group that knew he was coming and who he's already dreamed about and who have told him his destiny. He finds his name in the text, right? And so that has to be mind blown. It has to be a confirmation of character. right? The person that's actually writing the past and the future and the present, the person that exists outside of those things, Yah-O, which name means was, is, and will be, according to the way that the Hebrew word Hayah is rendered. If you guys understand that the word Yah-O is Yod He Wah He, and that word, if you were trying to parse it, what would it be? If you use it as a verb, which Hayah is a verb, it would be a wild form of to be that kind of incorporates both perfect, imperfect, and is it imperative? There's another form that the name of it I'm forgetting. Aspects into the word, so it has the yod in the front. If this is haya, the yod in the front would indicate future tense. If this is um, if it's perfect tense, or because imperfect would be the yod in the front, that means will be. If you have haya with a yod in the front, it would be yehi, right? And that indicates will be. So if you have the hey on the end, as if it's the full term, that indicates perfect tense, which is past tense, because in the uh, perfect form, you have lots of forms of haya with the full word in it, if that makes sense to you. So that indicates past tense. And then the wa in the middle, making it ya-o, like shalom, indicates present time. The time is now. If you're saying shalom, you're saying peace, right? And that you're not saying shalom. That means that's the word to peace or to be whole. Right? So that's the indication of it would be a past or a future thing. But if you say shalom, that indicates now, peace. So if you're saying shalom, shalom to somebody, that's peace now, right? So do you get what I mean? The word Yahoo means past, present, and future will be, right? So if you were trying to parse it, it would be some weird form of Hayah, which kind of incorporates all the essence of time into a single word. And so yes, when we look at the and I lost track of where I was going with this, but I'm still talking about finding your name in the text. And this should tell you that the person, the entity who is writing this text, has control over time. And this is what we see with the interpretation of what we're reading. And that's the same thing that Alexander the Great would have said. Don't worry about that dot. I didn't mean to put that dot right there. Right. You don't remember that one? It's actually right here too. You've done this before? This was on your redo. You're on the final already? Wow. All right. So, shalom, shalom, Mishpachah. Looks like somebody has checked in. We're talking about finding your name in the text. And we're going over some people that in history that have found their name in the text. And we just got to Alexander the Great, who we just said came through Jerusalem in order to conquer Egypt, to crown himself Pharaoh before he went on to conquer the rest of the world, and actually ran across a group of people that knew who he was, that knew he was coming, and that knew what he was going to do. You see what I'm saying? And then they showed him in the text. I don't know if you were around for the beginning of this, but they showed him in the text where it's prophesied for a person to come and do all of these different things, and Alexander the Great sees that it's him and doesn't destroy Jerusalem, and then goes on to do exactly what the text says that he would do. So this is him finding his actual name and his, character in the text. So he would have recognized right away that the author of this text, Elohim, would have been able to be in control of the past, the present, and the future, because of course, no man can absolutely know what's going to happen. So he sees in the text, okay, the creator of heaven and the earth is the one that created this because he's seen exactly what I was going to do, right? This is how important identification is in the text, because even a single man's prophecy can be very important in world events. We know Alexander the Great went on to change the entire world from that point forward, right? So the next person, find their name in the text, and this is where we want to get to the the reason why I wanted to make this video is because there are some times in history that are outside of the biblical era where this has happened again, and you won't see it unless you know the characters involved, because they've hidden it very well in history. Okay, so when Rome was conquered, we know that Rome destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, and the Israelites after that were scattered, right? But what we don't know is that Rome was conquered, and Rome was actually, the people of Rome were replaced with the people that were conquerors, right? And then those conquerors went on to call themselves Roman, even though they actually were not. We know that the conquerors of Rome in 410 AD and then again in 550 AD, these were Gothic tribes who we have previously identified as Magog, right? And so there was two separate instances in between this time, in 410 AD to 550 AD, when the final collapse was, that Rome was threatened with destruction, right? All right. Book of Daniel, right? Was that the time of the dark? Yeah, Book of Daniel, absolutely correct. Where Alexander the Great was prophesied to go, and it says that a goat with a notable horn moved west, pushed west, and his feet didn't touch the ground. And it was a reference to how fast this particular person moved in his campaign to take over the rest of the world. Alexander the Great would have seen that, and through Jerusalem did see it, according to Josephus, and then went on to go on and do exactly what the prophecy says. And his kingdom was broken up in the same way into the four winds, everything. And that's what, Daniel 8, Daniel 7, around there. It says, was that the time of the Dark Ages? Yes. So this is the beginning of the Dark Ages. And if you haven't seen, Shalom, Shalom, Mishpachah, I'm learning the trade. If you haven't seen the video Mystery of Nog, I recommend that you go check it out, because it talks about all of these things. This is the beginning of the Dark Ages. Rome falling was the beginning of the Dark Ages. This is because the barbarians, who we know of as the Magog clans, and this is what the video goes over, come and conquer Rome, and then send the world into a serious age of unlearning, right? It's all the accomplishments of Egypt, all the accomplishments of Babylon, all the accomplishments of Persia, all the accomplishments of Greece, and then all the accomplishments of Rome, all of that just falls right at the time of the invasions. And then the world is sent into a deep depression, right? Where learning is not prohibited, but is the information of the past is really gone. And what people have to do is relearn all of these things in order to develop society to mimic the times of old, when there was a working and look it up. Just came out about a week ago. I've seen your channel before. I can go in one of your videos probably and post a link to it, or maybe I should have a link in the in the chat box. I don't know how to interact with the chat box, but you can see it on my channel. It's called American Jew 4 Mystery of Magog, and it goes over all of this information. And I'm just really hitting the highlights right now to prove a specific point about the importance of identification in the text. So so we understand that Alexander the Great identified himself in the text or was shown who he was in the text. And we're moving forward to the time where Rome fell. We're in 410 AD to 550 AD. And this is about 350 or so years after Judah is dispersed and Rome has destroyed, the remnant of Israel, sending uh, Judah into captivity to the far-flung places in the Roman Empire, to stay there for a little while, and then, cultivate these areas with some information, and then become enslaved again, and then move on to other places. We know that these happen. So the Gothic tribes, one of the tribes was the Alans, I believe it was. And they come down, they go all the way down, they conquer all of Spain and Portugal, and then go down through North Africa, then go back east, all the way to Libya, to the Libya area, right before you get to Egypt, and then plan an assault on Rome going through the Mediterranean Sea, right? And so they do that, and they go all the way up, and they knock on the door of Rome, and the Romans send a. Give me 1 second, you guys. I'm gonna have to grab this. Okay, dang. Okay, all right. And it said, and so I'm sorry, I had a text, and so the the Romans come knocking on the door, and this was a mystery to me when I saw this. I thought it was weird. And so what they do, not the Romans, the Goths, the Magogites, come knocking on the door, and the Romans, instead of sending out an army, because they're fighting Goths all over the world, all over their empire right now. Rome owns from the west all the way to the east, to the far borders of China and Russia and all these different places in the east, all the way out to the ocean in the west, and then all of North Africa too. So they're trying to defend all of their different areas, and then you got the Goths come knocking on their door, and so they're stretched thin and they can't really defend themselves, and they're really vulnerable, right? And they do plunder and they do pillage, but they don't destroy the city. And the reason why is because the Romans sent out the Pope. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. Why, when you have a Goth savage army, which is known for killing and doing the worst things to Christians, for some reason, I'm not sure why these Goths were so adamantly killing Christians, but they were, and these were not, not Sarim necessarily, were Christians. These were Roman Catholics, right? And so they were just destroying these Christians, right? And if they found out you were a monk or anything like that, they do you worse, right? And so they send out the Pope. And I'm thinking, how are they going to send the Pope out to this barbarian horde, knowing that he's just going to get torn to shreds? The Pope stops the invasion. The Pope goes out, says something to the leader, and I believe his name is Alaric, says something to the leader, and stops the invasion. They do not destroy Rome, right? He said, I watched that. Great knowledge. I appreciate your content, because I was really struggling with the Edomite doctrine, because it did not make any sense who Yah and his glory being presented to all nations. Absolutely correct. Hallelujah. I really appreciate you for supporting that video, because that does need to get out. People don't understand the significance uh, of of correct identification. So, that's one thing that I, kind of harp on this channel. But they send out the Pope, and he doesn't get torn to shreds. He actually succeeds in convincing this Gothic king, who is not known for mercy, to not destroy Rome, right? A few years later, and I may be mistaking my time. This call for a second, so I'll have to close this out. and I can pick back up on it later, but I want to get this out. Um, so he is successful in repelling this barbarian tribe, right? Keeping them from destroying Rome. And then 3 years later, so if I've got my dates mixed up, then you'll be able to tell here because it may have been the later time instead of the earlier time. There's one time when it's early, and this is 410, and there's another time when it's later, and this is 550. And so I believe now that it's the later time. So again, 3 years later, a different barbarian horde, this time the Huns with Attila the Hun. And if you've done any research on Attila the Hun, these are again Magog, another different Magog tribe coming from a different direction, not going all around to the end around, but coming directly south, right? To get to, and this is Rome, not, I think this is Rome and not Constantinople. But again, you might want to check me to double check to make sure he's right. So Attila the Hun comes down, knocks on the door, and they send this same Pope out again. The same Pope has another conversation with this barbarian horde, leader being Attila, one of the most, maybe the most famous of the barbarian leaders in history. And again, he does not get torn to shreds. Send him back, and they don't destroy Rome. Both of these conversations were kept secret in history. The Pope, because the same Pope does not record what is being said, and then the opposite barbarian leader doesn't record what is said either. It's a secret what that Pope said to keep these barbarian hordes, which were itching to take the plunder from Rome, to take, what they call the booty from Rome, and didn't do it, right? Because of this particular word, because of this particular Pope. And the conversation was secret. What was said to those barbarians to make them stop? And of course, we can only speculate because this is a secret, but taking in mind what we know about the text, what could he have said to keep these two people, from destroying Rome? Do you think he could have used an ancient word that they would have recognized, but the world would not have known them as? Because remember, if you've seen the video, the Greeks didn't call them Magogites. They called them Scythian. And then they called them all of these other names from the different small Magog groups that splintered into these different groups and existed, independently on their own, and sometimes were together and sometimes were apart, just like the feet and totem of Daniel, the very last kingdom. It's very important to recognize. So they called themselves a whole bunch of different names, but internally, they would have known who their ancestors were. Internally, they would have known that they came from Magog. And this would be a secret inside their families that the outside world wouldn't be privy to, because the outside world called them Scythians, right? And barbarians, and then a host of names, not Magog. So do you think that the Pope was able to go to Attila the Hun, or to go to this particular person, who the other person was, and say, I know who you are? Does the name Magog ring a bell? And them knowing that you shouldn't know would tell them, whoa, this guy has access to information about the past that he shouldn't. Therefore, he has some sort of, they would have seen it as magic, some sort of special ability that matters, that we need, that we should hold on to. And if you see, I'm coming. And if you see after the fact, these barbarian kings began to convert to Abrahamic religions, because it didn't matter which one. They all used the same text and all had the same style of prophecies. So you had one convert to Christianity, a big group, one convert to Judaism, Khazars, big group, and the other convert to Muslims, right? This all happened at the same time in the Dark Ages, between the years of 800 AD and 1100 AD. This all happened at the same time, right? So Attila the Hun was told who he was in a text, with a person that should not have known. And that's why he said, I might not want to destroy this city. I might want to grab. You're finished? Please go over it because I know you didn't go over it. Go over it again for me. I'm coming in. From a text that should not, from a. I'm coming. I'm almost finished here. Okay, I'm coming. Huh? Yeah. Lebab. Lab. No, but yeah, it's probably Be Lebabo. In his heart. Or it could be Be Labo. Either one of those. Okay, you guys, that's really what I wanted to get out. Okay, it says, I wonder why the keeps Japheth hidden. Well, it is the Father keeping him hidden, and it is a mystery. But of course, we have the people who have controlled the information of history. So, with that being said, the Vandals do come and conquer Rome later on, and what they do is they take the artifacts of Jerusalem. They take the menorah, they take the writings. The Vandals end up having those things, right? Yeah, we know the Vandals are a Gothic Magogite tribe, right? And so if you imagine getting the information of the future in your hands, getting a book and seeing your name in it, what type of power would that bestow upon you? So the reason why we don't know all the inner working of who Japheth is and where he went and why Magog is in control and all that is because Magog has control of his for the past 1,500 years. That's why we don't know these things, because the person who the Pope pointed out as being Magog later came back and conquered that same place and put his people in instead of the Pope's people, and then made his own popes. We know that to be a fact because the what they call the early Christian fathers, Jerome and Origen and Augustus, is it Augustine, and all of these different people are in Rome, right? And they're writing about history, they're writing about their time periods. And who is it? Is it Jerome or Origen? I can't remember which one, but early, and this is 300 AD, 400 AD, around there, an early Christian father wrote about the Goths, right? Wrote about the Goths and said, these are surely Magog, right? This is Magog who we're talking about. They have all the characteristics. They are, and we are not. The Romans are not Magog, right? And so they looked at them as the barbarian hordes. And they said, this is who these people are. These are the Magogites, right? This is around 350 or so AD when the early Christian fathers are talking about this. The next generation, this is 410 when these Goths start knocking on Rome's door, like we just talked about. The next generation of Christian authors then acknowledge that their predecessors identified Magog as these Gothic people that are right here in front of me, but we disagree. Now we believe that Magog is this personification of evil in whatever nation is trying to go against the church. So we literally see the editing process take place in history, where these people found their name in the text and started to edit themselves out theologically. Instead of taking the name out of the text, they edited themselves out with the doctrine. Now the doctrine leads you a different way. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why it's so important to identify correctly, because Japheth and his descendants, particularly Magog, has taken control of the text in such a way as to hide themselves in it. They've given us this other doctrine to lead us in this other direction, but it's actually them. It's actually the Magogites who are destined at the end of the world to, it says message retracted. It says, I wonder why they keep the message. Okay, all right. So, which actually at the end of the world are predicted to be destroyed on the hills of Israel by not the children of Israel, but by a great disaster from heaven after Israel is brought back forth from the nations and dwell in Israel safely. So at the end of the world, when Israel is regathered, Gog and Magog come against Israel and are destroyed. And that happens twice. And they definitely do not want to know that. And that's why finding your name and finding their name in text is of utmost importance. If you look and you pick up a book and you're the bad guy in the story, what does that give you the power to do? And when we look out at the world that we have now and see all the missing information, see all the misdirection, we can put a point onto why that is, where it started, and now what we need to do because of it, how we need to educate because of this. Do you see what I'm saying? It really helps us out as far as prophecy is concerned. And I know my boys are in there. We're taking a test today, so I'm going to have to get on here. I want to make sure that you guys get this point. It's a very, very important point. I really had more to say about it because then the concept of being able to pick up that book and find your name in it is of utmost importance because it absolutely proves who is in control. All right, I'm coming. All right, shalom, shalom, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, brother. Shalom, shalom.